All right. Hello and welcome to the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host, Dr. Cara Quant, and I have a special guest on the podcast today. Her name is Rachel Gelman. She is a pelvic floor physical therapist in the San Francisco area. And we also worked together during the last Viva La Vulva art exhibit in San Francisco. She was on the panel. She helped to put it together. And so I am just so honored to have you on the podcast today, Rachel.
I'm so honored to be here, and my cat is also honored to be here because he's trying to get in on the action.
Your random tail, then.
Yeah, I know. You'll be seeing him. He's definitely trying to join in on the conversation.
Yeah.
Very sex positive.
Yeah, it's very sex positive cat. And so we are having a conversation today all about sex toys. Yes. And I remember, sex toys, it's such a big industry. Like, I was reading a statistic about it being a billion or like multi-billion-dollar industry. And there are so many sex toys that are out there. And I remember like discovering them as a youth and being like, what are these and why are there so many, and how do you choose the right one, and all of that good stuff. So I feel like it's an appropriate conversation to have all about sex toys.
Yeah, and it's one of the industries during this pandemic that have actually been doing quite well, as more and more people are staying home and, either wanting to spice things up with their partner or because they're at home and alone and dating is on hold. So it definitely is one of the industries that is doing well during this difficult time.
Yeah, and so they're just sending all of their sex toys. People are ordering them and they're being sent in like discreet boxes to people's.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And so I wanted to like start out with talking about my first experience with sex toys. I'm not gonna get into like the juicy details of it, but like my experience about it, because yes, I remember growing up and seeing sex toys, maybe like when I was in college, and not knowing what to do about it, or actually feeling like this is not what I want to bring into my bedroom. Sex toys. Like, I don't know how my partner is going to feel about it. Are they going to be jealous about me bringing something in? And so I remember it was like in my late 20s when I had my first sex toy. And I don't know if that is like, is that young? Is that old? I don't know. In the grand scheme of things, because I think a lot, or at least for my friends, a lot of us haven't talked about sex toys and like our first times with them. But I would say I was in my like late 20s, and the first one that I got was inspired by Sex in the City, and it was the rabbit. And for everyone or anyone who doesn't know what the rabbit is, it's both a vaginal stimulation as well as a clitoral stimulation. So it has both like a dildo component to it as well as a vibrator clitoral stimulation component to it. And that was absolutely great. And I use that. Yeah, like I don't even remember if it was battery operated or what, but I remember getting a good use out of my first sex toy.
Yeah, I think a lot of people rushed to get the rabbit after that episode. I remember, hearing a lot of people talk about it. I never got a rabbit, actually. I think my first sex toy was probably a vibrating cock ring in college.
Okay.
That is what I think is probably the first thing, because I think they had them at Blockbuster go? I think they had them at like Walgreens or CVS. Like I think that's when like Trojan came out with like having those types of products like in the drugstore, and it was like, oh, like this is so scandalous. So I want to say that was the first one that I had.
Wow.
With with a partner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think probably like my first like solo one was probably some sort of a bullet, like a small discrete like bullet one, which I don't think is like probably the only bullet the NRA does not support or defend. But
the vibrating bullet, right?
yeah, the vibrating bullet. But yeah, I think that was probably the first one, was like a vibrating cock ring or a ring.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like I mean, I also like discovered that there's sex shops and places where they sell all of these things. Did I know that you could buy it at like a CVS, or I don't even think I remember seeing anything close to like a vibrator or cock ring or anything like that at any convenience stores. It was usually like I had to have, like a hat and some sunglasses before I went into a sex shop, because I was just so embarrassed by going into these places.
Yeah, definitely.
But now I don't care. Like now I can go into the Pleasure Chest, which is a very popular one in LA. And I could give a care. Yeah, I could.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah, where my new clinic is right above Good Vibrations, which I'm like obsessed with. They're not open right now for business, but that's kind of my favorite place in the city is Good Vibes.
Yeah, I think that's like isn't that the only like big place? Like Good Vibes is like the only big sex shop in the Bay Area, correct?
In San Francisco, there is another one in Oakland called Fillmore,
Okay.
which is good. But yeah, Good Vibes has like a couple locations, so that's why they have like the big name recognition.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other like smaller ones, but I feel like Good Vibes is kind of has the biggest name.
Yeah. And have you done, I mean, kind of going off of like where to buy sex toys, because that would be a good thing to talk about. So Pleasure Chest, I felt like is a big one. Good Vibe or Good Vibrations, right?
Yeah, Good Vibrations.
Vibrations is a good one out in San Francisco. I haven't done any. MedAmour. I mean, the company that I work with, they're also a good sex toy. It's more for like vibrators and dildos, but you can buy things over there. I haven't gone to like Adam and Eve. Do you know of any like online any online ones?
Yeah, so there's a couple. So Unbound is a really great option. They make their own sex toys and products. Dame is another one.
Yeah.
Lelo, who I work with, they're in a lot of these companies are in the stores, but they have their own online shop. Lora DiCarlo is another cool one. Let me think. The Lioness is another local one.
Yeah, Lioness. What was the DiCarlo?
Lora DiCarlo.
Lora DiCarlo.
So she made a big name, and their company made a big name a couple of years ago because they won a big award at CES. And initially they realized it was a sex toy, so they took the award away. And obviously that caused a lot of outrage. So then they gave it back. So that was kind of their big splash into the sex toy world.
Interesting. So they couldn't get an award for being a sex toy?
Yeah, well, they got it, and then I think the people realized like, oh, it's a sex toy, like that can't happen.
Of course not, yeah.
Yeah, of course not. So then they took it away, and then realized that was a bad idea, and then gave it back. So yeah, that's who Lora DiCarlo is.
Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, if you guys haven't, or for the people out there listening, if you're looking for some good places to go online to shop for vibrators, then those are some places that you can go to. Or if you are in the LA area, I mean, I don't know. You said Good Vibrations isn't open.
I feel like maybe some of their locations might be
Okay,
now. I just know the one right by my office is not.
is not. Uh-huh.
But their online shop is definitely open.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm not sure. I feel like maybe some of their locations are doing like contactless pickup or something like that. And I know they have stores on the East Coast, so I don't know if those locations are open.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not positive,
Yeah.
but it definitely would be worth checking out.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, if you're close to the area and you can walk past and see if they're open, but definitely the online shops, which have been big during this pandemic time,
Mm-hmm.
go online and do some shopping for some sex
Yeah.
toys.
Yeah.
If you haven't already, if you haven't been one of the millions of people that have, started getting into or ordering sex toys.
Yeah.
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 Um, so I was like reading some things online about sex toys, some facts. Um, I don't know if you knew that the most common sex toy is actually vibrators. So I'll also talk about like what are the different sex toys. I've also heard sex devices
Mm.
by different doctors. So they're going away from sex toys to sex devices because I think there's even a wide range of like medical ones versus non-medical ones,
Yeah.
sex devices. But yeah, the most common sex toy is actually the vibrator, which I did not
Huh.
know. I mean,
Yeah. I
it
would.
yeah, I wouldn't have realized that
Yeah. I
case.
would not have. I mean, I guess maybe that's what I would have guessed because I feel like that's the most prevalent option. But I don't know if I. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah. And that the Hitachi, the magic wand, which is that huge thing that almost looks like a back massager, that I've
Mm-hmm.
actually talked about on earlier episodes with MedAmour, Lily Wang from MedAmour. The Hitachi magic wand was actually introduced in the 1970s.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's another fact.
Yeah. Yeah, Good Vibrations, they actually have at one of their locations on Polk Street, they have a vibrator museum and they do tours and talk all about the history of the vibrator. Dr. Carol Queen hosts some of them.
Yeah.
Um, so anyone in the area, maybe when we're allowed to go do things again,
Yes.
I highly
Public
recommend
with
it
other
because
people.
yeah, they have a Hitachi magic wand there.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. That's really cool. Yes, and actually, Dr. Carol Queen was a part of the last Viva Vulva art exhibit in San Francisco, and we were actually thinking about collaborating or doing something at the museum, at the Vibrator Museum. It never happened, but that would be another great thing to do. Part of your
Yeah, because
history. See what vibrators
yeah,
are out there.
yeah, because she has, or at the museum, they have some of the like early ones that were developed in the late 1800s. That they originally developed them to treat female hysteria, which was just a kind of like made up diagnosis for women who had any symptoms that they didn't really like. I think the definition they had in medical textbooks was something about like extreme emotions in women. Um, so they developed this hand crank vibrator that essentially brought women to orgasm, but I think they described it as something less tittillating because it was the late 1800s. But that was where like one of the first sex devices or vibrators came from was this doctor in the late 1800s. And there's actually a really good movie called Hysteria. I think Maggie Gyllenhaal was in. That's all about like the development of these hand crank vibrators to treat hysteria. I
Actually, I should
recommend.
do some research, or I should watch that movie.
Yeah, I think it came out in like 2010, 2011.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's pretty recent.
yeah, but it's all about, yeah, the, I don't know how like accurate it
Accurate,
is,
yeah.
but it was good. Yeah, it's all about this doctor whose hands got tired, and so he developed this hand cranked device.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
yeah,
Yes, I mean there's so much history that is a part of different sex things. Like, yeah, sex
yeah,
toys, the reason why they were brought about. Yeah, it's all interesting.
yeah. They
Mhm.
hid like it would be hidden in like women's magazines and like Home and Garden as like, oh, like a beauty product, or something to help. Like it'd be kind of like sneakily snuck in there, and like women knew what it was for, but it was kind of advertised in a way that wasn't same sex or
Yeah,
orgasm,
yeah.
like a
Because of
device
course
to
you
help you
couldn't say that
relax.
in a magazine, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree. So I was looking to see like what are the different types of sex toys that are out there. So we know that the vibrator is the most common one, but I didn't know, and this is according to one source, but that there's 12 different types of sex toys that are out there.
yeah,
So there is the wand vibrator, there's the clitoral vibrator, there's the clit suction. So that's like what the womanizer. Um,
yeah. And there's
haven't
a couple
heard of,
other, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, there are dildos, um, butt plugs, and it is actually anal August.
It is.
So yes, butt plugs can be tried during this time, during this anal August.
Yeah, why
Um,
not?
yeah, there are G-spot toys, there are A-spot toys, and I've actually never heard of an A-spot. But I guess it's further back than the G-spot.
Yeah,
Yeah. There are rabbit vibrators, which is kind of like multi-use, prostate toys, anal beads, cock rings, and glass and metal wands. So
yeah.
it's a lot.
I
It's a
would
very
also,
extensive little list there.
yeah, I would also probably add like there's wearables, which are like underwear or something that someone can wear, and then a partner or whoever would have the remote, or you can have the remote.
Yes.
Yeah, so that'd be one I'd probably add to that list.
Okay, so we have
As,
13.
yeah, and I'd also say maybe strap-ons, but I don't know if that would go under the dildo category.
Yeah, it might. But yes, I mean, I feel like this is, definitely not the end all be all of the list. And there's probably way more that are out there that are, just coming out, people
Yeah,
have put together. Um, but yeah.
yeah, it's a very interesting industry. I think that's why I find that I'm like so drawn to it, because there's so many things coming out and things people are developing and coming up with. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I mean, you've actually I've tried to collaborate with Lioness in the past, but aren't they doing a device that is both like, can't you hook it up to music and you can like play your own music while you're
I'm not I'm
masturbating?
not yeah, I'm not sure if they have the music technology. I know there's definitely a device that has that, but Lioness actually, they're actually doing a research study right now. They're doing two. And their device, it looks kind of like the rabbit. It's that similar, has the internal device as well as the external clitoral stimulator. And
Yeah.
it connects to an app, and it kind of gathers all this data, including like pelvic floor muscle contractions. I want to say temperature. I forget all the different pieces of information they're gathering.
Yeah.
And they actually, I don't know about the music, but I know you can have them turn all that data into a piece of art. And so you can have your orgasm like made into a piece of art. I don't know. I don't know if they're still doing that, but for a time they were, and it was pretty cool because they had an event at their office space in Oakland, where they had these different like orgasm art pieces, which was pretty
Oh
cool.
my gosh. Good
And
luck
but
with that
yeah,
in the Viva La Vulva. I
yeah,
did
I
it.
know yeah, it's definitely right up your alley. But I know they're now doing some research. One is looking at like sexual health and menopause, and another one is actually looking at pelvic floor function and sexual health. So you can download the app and like opt in to be a part of their study,
Mm,
which is pretty cool.
that is really cool. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, that's really cool. So if anyone wants to be in a study
yeah,
on sexual health and menopause and the pelvic floor, then head over to, I'm sure they have a website, Lioness.
yeah. It's on their website, the
Yeah.
Lioness.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which helps us to segue into sex toys for the pelvic floor, since you are a pelvic floor physical therapist.
yeah.
Do you use sex toys with, or okay, let me rephrase the question. Let me, do you use or like recommend sex toys to your clients? How do you use sex toys within your practice?
Yeah, so yeah, it's definitely there's a lot of, since it's such a huge industry, it definitely can play a role with patients that are having pelvic floor dysfunction. There's a device we use a lot called dilators, which is kind of like these graduated dildos. So sometimes people don't need like a full set of dilators. Maybe they just need one or two. So that's sometimes something I recommend, is that they can just go buy like a dildo, especially if they're telling me um, they're having pain only with like their partner. Like they've gone through the dilator set, but their partner is bigger than the largest dilator. I'll tell them, I'm like, hey, measure your partner when he's erect, and then go into the sex shop and find something that is similar to your partner. There's also a product out there called Clone a Willy, where you
Oh
can
no,
make a cat.
Willie.
Yeah, Clone a Willy, where you can make a model of your partner,
Wow.
and then use. So sometimes I'll be like, okay, you're going to use that to essentially like get used to something that is identical to your partner.
Hmm.
If having sex with your partner is painful and you've tried every other dilator, but it's just like you're not able to get to that point of having penetrative sex with your boyfriend, husband, partner.
Hmm.
But sometimes again, people are like, I don't need this full set of dilators. I don't need 10 dildos. I only need one.
Yeah.
So I tell them, go, to Good Vibes or go online and find something. So that's one way I definitely use them or recommend them in practice.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of times I tell people to check out vibrators or sex toys when they get to a point that they're able to have pain-free sex, but they're like, I don't know how to have fun with sex because it's been painful for so long, or I don't know how to, it doesn't feel good. I wouldn't say it's fun. And, maybe they've never orgasmed, or they've never masturbated or had any type of solo sexual experience. So a lot of times I encourage people to look at, what works, at least have that for themselves or with their partner. And it's kind of a way to kind of move past, okay, we've gone through this therapeutic process, and you're now able to have pain-free sex, but how do we move into making sex pleasurable? And that's where sex toys and vibrators can come into play.
Yeah. And so let me ask you, do you have the clients where they um, are hesitant to bring up bringing a sex toy into their bedroom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, definitely. A lot of times it's a conversation that I don't have with them. I mean, it varies. Sometimes it's like the first thing people ask me. Sometimes it's something I bring up like down the line. A lot of times, because that's a little bit outside of my scope of practice, I'm having them work with like a sex therapist or a sex coach to kind of address that piece of it.
Yeah.
But sometimes people will just ask me like, oh, like how can I make sex feel good? Or like, how do I have an orgasm? And instead of having them have to maybe kind of in between the time where they go work with someone like a sex therapist or a sex coach. I'll say like, oh, like if you want to go take a look and kind of start exploring those different options, um, it's definitely a conversation I'll have, but it's definitely something I would want a specialist to also work with them on.
Yeah. Having these like conversations with their partner, how to bring it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge,
Yeah.
it's a huge thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you want sex to be comfortable, if you want sex to be pleasurable, which we all have the right to,
Mm-hmm.
uh, yeah, I mean, having that conversation is the hurdle, I guess you can
Yeah.
get to that pleasure.
Yeah. So I'll definitely provide a lot of resources. There's a lot of good books out there about, after you've healed painful sex, how do you make it pleasurable? But sometimes people do need more support in how to have those conversations.
Yeah. hmm And actually, I just had a conversation on my last podcast episode, having, or at least uh, with advice on how to bring it up. How to just
Mm-hmm.
talk about sex to a partner, and sometimes it's not easy. And someone's
Yeah.
actually recommending starting the conversation over text. I feel like, we're in an age where technology we use a lot, text messaging we use a lot rather than, speaking with someone over the phone. And
Mm-hmm.
so the conversation can at least start with like a text.
Yeah, yeah, I know. It definitely feels safer behind a screen. That's why we have, trolls and people who write horrible things online
Yeah.
that you would never say out loud.
Yeah.
So I definitely think we feel safer with that kind of level of anonymity. But
Yeah.
yeah, it can definitely be hard. I know there's all sorts of things out there. There's games and cards you can play with your partner to like kind of help start those conversations. um, there's one company called Dipsy that has like audio erotica, but in their app, they also have kind of like guides for how to talk about these subjects.
Ooh. Wait, what is it
So,
called?
it's called Dipsy. It's
Gypsy.
spelled Dipsea. So I always want to say Dipsia, but I'm pretty sure it's actually pronounced Dipsy.
Okay.
Um, but maybe I'm wrong again. It's Dipsia, but Dip, like, yeah, Dipsea.
SEA. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's so many creative ways that people have um, put out there to start this conversation, because I know that everyone knows that it's an important conversation.
It's important, but it's hard. I think
Yeah.
that's why, talks about like having high quality sex education in our schools is so polarizing because it's just such a scary topic for people to think about. But yeah, it's important.
Yeah. Totally important. Um, do you have any advice on do you have any advice on how to pick a dildo or vibrator? I mean, I know you kind of already talked about it, but is there
Yeah.
advice that you give?
It's so personalized because I give sex toys out a lot as gifts, and I used to be like, I'm going to give the one I like the best because obviously what I like is what everyone's going to like. Um, and then I found out that wasn't the case. So I kind of describe the different types, sort of like you did earlier. I don't go through that whole long list. I kind of explain. I'm like, oh, well, there's this kind, and there's this kind. Um, but I think that's where going on these different websites or going into the store if you can and looking, and because especially in a place like, I don't know what it's like at the one in LA, but up here at Good Vibration, they have all of them out. You can kind of like play around with them, see how they work, see what kind of like feels good.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of what I recommend is sort of actually looking because everyone is different. Like, again, what I like you might not like,
Yeah.
someone over there might not like. And also, again, it's like, well, is it for you to use alone? Are you hoping to integrate it with a partner? All those kinds of things you need to think about. Typically, I say maybe start with something simple. So again, that's where those like smaller like bullet vibrators can be good, or something that's like slender, small, and just has like a couple features. Because sometimes people can feel a little intimidated if they get one that has like rotating parts and like a movable thing and a
Yeah.
remote and all these buttons. That can seem a little overwhelming versus something that just has like two buttons up and down and that's it.
Yeah.
So sometimes starting simple is best, but sometimes people are like, nope, I want that one that's like has all these parts and adaptions and buttons and lasers and it's whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's
So
good. That is good advice. And I would also like to add that, don't be afraid to get it wrong. I think
yeah.
that's like another big thing because I have bought vibrators and, different things before, or been gifted them. And I'm like, I tried it and this is okay. Or, this is way too much stimulation. I need to like back it down. So you get to learn about yourself. You get to learn what sensations you like with using or trying different ones.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes I've gotten one that I'm like, oh, I'm probably going to love this. It's just like this other product. But I'm like, oh, I didn't like this one at all. So sometimes it's also trying a different brand,
Yeah.
and playing around with that. But yeah, like you said, it's all about just learning about yourself, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. About what you like and what you don't like.
Yeah.
Yes, I totally believe in that. So coming to a close, I had a couple questions about how people can stay in contact with you, kind of what are your new ventures, because I know that you started something new in San Francisco. So I wanted you to share with the listeners about it.
Yeah. So I opened my own solo pelvic floor physical therapy practice in San Francisco, Pelvic Wellness and Physical Therapy, which in the middle of the pandemic feels a little crazy to start something new, but so that's where I am now.
Great.
Um, Also trying to take time to do more writing. So I'm working on a blog. Um, but yeah, people can find me at pelvic well, pelvicwellpt.com. And that's kind of the best way to contact me.
Wait, say that one more time. I think it was also cutting out. And I'll put this in the show notes for everyone. You said
Yeah,
pelvic
pelvic well PT.
well PP. Okay. All right. So I'll put that in and that's the website.
That's the website.
Okay. So yes, I will put that in the show notes. So you can talk more about sex toys or you can make a consultation with her to talk about your pelvic floor.
Yeah.
Yes.
My
And
favorite thing.
yes, exactly. And so I was doing this before. I want this to continue as a tradition. But I want you to leave the listeners with an uplifting or an empowering story about the vulva.
Yeah. The vulva is so amazing. I think the big thing for me that I always talk about, and I have talked about since I started working in this field, is that they're all different. I mean, just like everyone's face, they all have like the essential components. But every single one I see looks different. And I think that's something really empowering and something I really think people should take to heart. That like your vulva is your own, and it's not going to look like someone else's, or someone you see on, in porn or in a picture. So I think that's kind of my favorite thing to share about the vulva is that they're all different,
Mm.
but they're all beautiful.
Yes, yes, and I love that because because they are all different, and I think that people can get upset about that, or like, I want to enhance, or I want to cut off, or I want to
Mhm.
manipulate my vulva in order for it to look normal, which there is no
Mhm.
normal. There is no
Yeah.
particular looking vulva. They're all you.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. They all have, again, those like floor, but they all look different.
Yes, they're all different. Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for being on the podcast and having
Yeah, of course.
discussion, this enlightening discussion about sex toys. Um,
Mhm.
so check out the show notes for all of the places, the online stores, and or the brick and mortar stores you can go to look for some vibrators. And thank you for being, a part of the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. And thank you, listeners out there, for listening to the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host, again, Dr. Cara Quant. Subscribe to the podcast, tell your friends and family about it, and get to hear some enlightening and empowering conversations about the vulva. So I thank you for listening and speak to you soon. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.